So, good morning. Good morning, participants. It is my pleasure to be your moderator of this session that will focus especially on how we can create opportunities to deliver effective South-South and triangular cooperation at country level. My name is Ree Weiss-Kjeldgaard. I am with the ILO. I'm currently the director of our partnership department, and I'm also the acting assistant director general for our external and corporate relations. It's really my privilege and my honor to be the moderator of a very distinguished panel with very rich learning that they will be sharing with us in a moment. Now, I would want to say that the scene for our particular session has been perfectly set this morning by another session that, in spite of its early hours starting at 8 o'clock, had a very active and dynamic discussion sharing evidence and examples from actual South-South cooperation activities at country level. And in that session, there was a big, I would say, recurrent conclusion coming out that not only is South-South and triangular cooperation extremely important, but it's remaining a very complementary and necessary modality together with development cooperation. It also affirmed that the effectiveness principles are relevant if well adapted to the modality of South-South cooperation. And then it also confirmed that the potential for South-South cooperation remains vast and is still to be fully unlocked. So in that context, I think we are extremely well contextualized in this rich panel, where we have 8 distinguished panelists at very high level with very rich experience that will intervene and share from their perspective what have been the learnings and key lessons taken away from their South-South cooperation activities. And I will like to have the session conducted in the following way. That first and foremost, we hear from each of our distinguished panelists. I will introduce them to you when they take the floor. And then after that, subject to time, we will have an additional round with our panelists before we will open up the floor for intervention and questions. At the same time, in addition to who are here with us in person, we also have a virtual platform, and together with my colleagues, actually those that have the credit for organizing that we are here, we will look at what is available of questions and observations from the virtual form. And by that, I need to kindly ask my colleague to bring me my phone, which I forgot. I'm so sorry. Now, I would then like to start by asking our first panelist, and that is you, Dr. Slamet Sodarsomo. You are the Acting Deputy Minister of Political Affairs, Law, Defense and Security from Indonesia, from the Ministry of Natural Development Planning, Bappenas, as some of us will know it as, to share with you your experience. And first of all, I say thank you that you are here with us today. You come from having just hosted also the G20 summit in Bali, which was a very important, not only G20 gathering, but also a forum that reaffirmed that the world is facing multiple crises, from both environmental changes, from the COVID, from the also conflicts we see around the world, and also the economic impact of the crisis in Ukraine. You also very much heard, I believe, the UN system emphasizing the importance of the multilateral system. And in that context, I want to underscore how important it is that we have G20, not only to support, but also to strongly promote the South-South cooperation. So for very many reasons, a big thank you to you for being here. I would very much like to ask you, when you're looking at this particular context, how do you really see, and what would you emphasize about the role of South-South cooperation as we go forward? And colleagues, I should let you know also that Everything is being available both in French, in English, and in Spanish. And of course, the panelists are free to speak in any of the 3 languages. And for those that are listening virtually, these languages are available as well. But Dr. Slamet, please. As you like. Absolutely.
Thank you, moderator. Yeah. Honorable speakers, ladies and gentlemen. In the post-COVID pandemic, global economic recovery remains uncertain and is projected to widen the gap between advanced economies, emerging markets, and developing economies. The geopolitical tension has also worsened economic recovery efforts. Together with other crises such as climate change, energy crisis, food and water security crisis, many countries have experienced increase in inequality and poverty. The major setbacks of development today upon efforts to advance the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The resolution for the crisis must be pursued together multilaterally, one of which through development cooperation. From the current development cooperation landscape and situation, we can identify the shifting paradigm from aid to development effectiveness. These are strongly linked with our commitment that development cooperation should go beyond aid and play a catalytic role in leveraging partnerships to improve development results, including through South-South Triangle Cooperation, SSTC. SSTC has emerged as an important modality to promote mutual benefit and knowledge sharing in tackling interlinked global challenges and accelerating the achievement of sustainable development goals. At the same time, SSTC could be one of the drivers of economic development, including decreasing the potential of geopolitical tension by promoting socio-economic cooperation and humanitarian efforts through mutual learning, sharing practices, and technology knowledge transfers, especially with countries affected by political tension. For example, our work in providing humanitarian and economic recovery support our neighboring countries through bilateral process, regional approach with ASEAN, as well as through engaging on SSTC with other countries to support the peace process in the country. This is aligned with the outcome document of BAPA Plus 40, which is recognizing SSTCs evolving from aimed at achieving sustainable development through the promotion of economic cooperation, including trade and investment, as well as our global commitment to support humanitarian effort. At the G20 Development Ministerial Meeting in Belitung, G20 development ministers agreed to renew the commitment to reinvigorate multilateralism for tackling global issues and accelerating the achievement of SDGs. In doing so, close partnership among countries, international organizations, multilateral development banks, and relevant stakeholders is strongly needed. G20 roadmap for stronger recovery and resilience in developing countries has put SSTC as one of the modalities to support the implementation of collective actions which focuses on micro, small, medium-sized enterprises adaptive social protections, as well as low carbon and climate resilient development. SSTC is crucial to ensure knowledge, experience, innovation, and proven sustainable financing approaches are scaled up across countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Slamet. Thank you. You have really put the emphasis on, again, the huge challenges we are facing, we, the world, in delivering on an actual realization of the SDGs. You have also highlighted the importance of, as you say, the catalytic factor or contribution of a South-South cooperation, and of course also the importance of having all stakeholders properly involved, including, and again, thank you for that emphasis, also the private sector, including the micro and small enterprises. Our second contributor is from Portugal. It's Mr. Francisco André. You are the State Secretary of the Foreign Affairs and Cooperation in Portugal. You have a strong educational background that spans legal economic issues, and also you have been working yourself as a lawyer, and you have had you have had a lot of public office positions, including head of cabinet and the Secretary of the State to the Presidency of Council of Ministers. You've been based also for your country in Brussels with the European Union, and head of cabinet of the Portuguese Prime Minister as well. Now, you have a very extensive experience as Portugal, as a global actor, but also as a very committed promoter to South-South cooperation. And you have also in that capacity hosted several international conferences, and where you have consistently promoted the consensus building and also the importance of effectiveness for South-South cooperation modality. So we would really appreciate also you sharing your experience of all these learnings that you have come out of that. You are also the host of the Lusophone community of countries. And what would you highlight as the key lessons learned that we really should take note of? Please, Mr. André, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Rie. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, participants, and good morning to everyone, of course. And thank you, Rie, for the introduction and for the very good questions that you just posed to me. And let me start by congratulating everyone on organizing such a great event. I've been also around yesterday and also today, and this is indeed an amazing event for everyone that works in this field. I will not waste any time elaborating on the difficult times that we are living and why the challenges that we have are growing every day. I think that what we need to do is to think with different approaches, and triangular cooperation is one of them. You asked me which specific lessons, which specific points we should highlight from what we have been learning on triangular cooperation, and on this I will touch only on 3 points. First, partnerships and why we need more inclusive partnerships. Secondly, more resources and knowledge. We need more resources and we need to take profit of the knowledge that we can share. And thirdly, of course, the impact and visibility on the ground at country level of triangular cooperation. Let me start by partnerships. Partnerships and more inclusive partnerships in triangular cooperation allow us to engage in more joint projects and in a very much demand-driven and context-specific by each country, and this is for us fundamental. It allows us, and it has been allowing us in recent projects to share experiences and definitely to come up with new ideas together with partner countries. And that's one of the most positive aspects that I want to highlight. And of course, being a politician, I will not hide from you that this has another added value. This strengthens the capacity of dialogue with partner countries, and it also helps our capacity to build trust between countries. As we are aware, that is very much necessary today. We have been partnering mainly with countries from Africa and Latin America, and I must tell you that the results, either in climate change projects, education or health, are very positive at the moment. You mentioned the international conference that you organized the last October in Lisbon, when it was very important because it allowed us to hear from colleagues, for instance, from Mozambique or Kenya, to call for more triangular projects and to in fields as health or protection of the environment, and to hear from them how this is helping not only projects for the sustainable development of their countries, but also to bring this this modality of cooperation in their own national strategies of cooperation. The second point that I wanted to address is that triangular cooperation mobilizes additional resources and definitely more knowledge. And why is it so important to mobilize more resources? Because it provides us with more robust budgets. And for all of us professionals of this area, we know how important it is to have more robust budgets to develop our projects, our actions and our programs. And bigger budgets bring also more visibility to this work, and as much more visibility will bring more resources, more public attention. We know, all of us working in this field, how hard it is to convince our Minister of Finances in each country to invest more in our field. And one thing that we have learned through triangular cooperation, more visibility, more engagement with other partners, makes our life easier to convince the owners of the budget to invest more on cooperation and development, and also allows us to share more knowledge. And more knowledge means more expertise, more technical capacity, which we believe it is essential to develop good projects. COVID-19 and the response to the pandemic, it was a very good example of how this triangular cooperation, of how this capacity to share knowledge immediately through a number of partners is important. I just give you an example. Portugal partnered with Israel and Guinea-Bissau to have better equipment, better capacity, more training to the health professionals, for instance, at the Central Hospital of Bissau, the capital of Guinea. And it was a terrific example. In more or less 3 to 4 weeks, we were able to put on the ground a project like this working. It was so important, and it is so important today because it has this final end that we all want, the appropriation, the capacity for each country to be more prepared to face additional challenges. And lastly, of course, we need, with triangular cooperation, I think that we can achieve more impact on the ground in terms of results. And this is the most important outcome of any project for all of us working in this field. Maybe 20 years ago, people would tend to look to South-South cooperation or to triangular cooperation as a small part of our business, but I believe that today everybody understands that this is, I would say, the decisive mechanism that we have to engage with as much partners as possible. This has been also the claim that we have been hearing from a number of countries. I would especially from small island developing states, SIDS. This is an essential tool to work with those countries in our view. I don't want to take any more time, but I wanted to tell you that we see this as a decisive mechanism for the future, and this is why we just adopted the end of last month our national strategy for cooperation and development until 2030, and triangular cooperation will remain at the front line of Portugal public policies on this field. Before finishing, let me just say that I might have to leave a bit earlier before the end of the panel, and for this I wanted to apologize to all the colleagues, but also to all the participants assisting to this panel today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. André. Thank you. And again, like our previous panelists, a very strong emphasis on very important points, including the national ownership and having anything we do linked into the national plans, but also the importance of co-creating and really making sure that this is speaking to what can be created of results with impact, and that there is given proper visibility for what is actually achieved. So thank you very much for your very also rich intervention here. We do understand that you will need to be excused early, so don't worry about that. That brings me to our third contribution, that we have the pleasure of having a representative from Sierra Leone. We have with us Mr. Jonathan Titus Williams, who is the Deputy Minister of the Planning and Economic Development in Sierra Leone. Thank you very much for being with us today. And you have a very extensive and comprehensive leadership and management background, where I believe that throughout all those years you have even yourself personally contributed to results in people's life through also South-South cooperation. But I would want you to, especially in view of Sierra Leone being the chair of the G7 Plus group, and that is the group of fragile and conflict-affected countries, and you are the chair of that, so I really would ask you to also speak of your experience in that capacity, especially in the fragility and conflict context today, when we even also add the additional issues that such countries' context will face. There is no doubt that the challenge ahead is considerable. So could you please share with us what lessons you would like to highlight when you think about South-South cooperation in the context of fragile and conflict-impacted countries, and what especially you think the GDPEC, so our community here, can do to better engage in the fragile-to-fragile cooperation. Please, Mr. Titus Williams.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. In the face of the many complex and interconnected challenges that fragile and conflict-affected countries face, the G7 Plus, an intergovernmental group of 20 conflict-affected countries that Sierra Leone chairs, adopted South-South engagement as one of its core pillars of cooperation. The G7 Plus has coined what is called fragile-to-fragile cooperation, which basically refers to the support that conflict-affected countries provide to each other, including peer learning, capacity building, mobilization of internal support, including financial assistance and knowledge generation. Like the G7 Plus itself, the fragile-to-fragile cooperation is based on voluntarism, cooperation, and solidarity. It first took place in practice through cooperation between Guinea-Bissau and Timor-Leste on election in 2014. Priorities under this initiative have so far been focused on peace, national reconciliation, elections, improving access to justice, public finance management, natural resources, management of UN transitions and humanitarian emergencies, and during crises such as Ebola. My country, Sierra Leone, together with Liberia and Guinea, benefited from such cooperation during Ebola virus disease outbreak in these three countries. The government of Timor-Leste, host of the G7 Plus Secretariat, under the fragile-to-fragile cooperation, provided financial assistance, which was channeled through our national systems. It is worth noting that however meager the fragile-to-fragile cooperation might be, it has unique features which distinguishes it from traditional cooperation modalities and makes it fit for purpose. I would like to mention few. Fragile-to-fragile cooperation is built on homegrown solutions and based on solidarity, and it takes place irrespective of geographical or political consideration that otherwise determine cooperation among countries. The central aim of such cooperation is the pursuit of peace and stability and supporting each other through national dialogue and reconciliation. This has therefore contributed to widening the sphere of South-South cooperation. Countries in the Global South, such as those in the G7 Country Plus, have first-hand experience in pursuing peace and stability through national means. Such experiences have the potential to inspire peace and stability and development in the war-affected countries. Recognized by many influential organizations, including the big G7, the Fragile to Fragile Cooperation Initiative is likely to enjoy an uptick over time because of the empathy for the difficulties of managing transition in fragile countries and for its potential to address conflict and fragility. More importantly, this can become an impetus to reform the international cooperation agenda. In the G7+, we produce and exchange knowledge regarding what works and what doesn't. This is aimed at providing empirical evidence of the good and bad practices that can further enhance the effectiveness of cooperation during uncertain times, such as the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate change. In summary, through this initiative and other forms of South-South cooperation, we have learned, firstly, that experience sharing is crucial to solving common challenges. Second, the South-South and triangular cooperation can be leveraged as a means of genuine solidarity, wherein the Global South can successfully mobilize resources to help those in urgent need. And thirdly, that South-South and triangular cooperation can prove vital in filling skills gap in critical areas in countries in the Global South. For example, the ECOWAS volunteer program provides support to critical areas of need, including teachers, doctors, consultants, and experts in various fields to support member states in achieving the SDGs. ECOWAS also provides mediation to sustain and promote peace in member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tejus-Williams. Another extremely important contribution, again, where in this interconnected crisis context that you underscore, South-South cooperation has a very important role to play, both as a leverage of development, but also to show how the development paradigm, we can change that. And I think that builds on what we have heard from previous panelists as well, that we need to change the way we work. And South-South cooperation also address it by really facilitate, as you call it, homegrown solutions that are speaking to the actual types of solutions that would work in a local context. Now, I really want to, again, thank you, all of you, for being with your very rich experience here. This is very, very important contributions. And we are now moving to the fourth intervention that we have from Mr. Pedro Manuel Moreno, who is the Deputy Secretary General of UNCTAD. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Moreno. You are, I think, recently joining UNCTAD, so it's a pleasure for us to have you here. But you have a very distinguished experience both from your country and working with development and international issues for a considerable period of time. So you have both in your current but also in previous roles had your own first-hand experience with South-South cooperation, both how it contributes to building trust, but also how it works to address actual development issues. So could you please share with us, from the perspective of UNCTAD, and in the context that we have heard other panelists also speak to, that is sobering, to say the least, what role you see for South-South and Triangular cooperation. And of course, you are coming from UNCTAD. We really would like to also hear how you see this in a digital transition and just-in-time sharing of information among developing countries as well. What would be your key recommendations for horizontal and more inclusive cooperation, including South-South cooperation? Mr. Moreno. Yes.
Thank you, Rie. I join my fellow panel members on congratulating the organization of this summit. The relevance and the pertinence of having this discussion right now is paramount, especially in this period of cascading crisis. So for UNCTAD, this is really a pleasure to be here and to share with you what we need to, what we want to offer and to put on the table. As our world has become more multipolar and the global South is sharing, you know, a larger share of the economy, South-South cooperation has naturally propagated. 10, 20 years ago, South-South cooperation felt like a niche field, a way to defy traditional models and stereotypes about international cooperation. But the situation, fortunately, is very different today. Many governments, countless business, and people are today involved in South-South cooperation. Today, it is a crucial, critical source for fostering sustainable development. Yet, its scope remains elusive, and this can be a missed opportunity. Better data, as you were mentioning at the beginning, Rie, can enable more systematic and informed South-South and triangular cooperation, where the recipient country has better tools to manage the flows and meet national needs. For this, we need to enhance measuring South-South cooperation, and that is the first point I'm going to be stopping at. We are proud to be the partner of developing countries for this purpose. UNCTAD, as you probably know, is a co-custodian agency of Sustainable Development Goal Indicator 17.3.1 on mobilizing additional financial resources for developing countries from multiple sources, along with the OECD. Our mandate is to support developing countries in measuring South-South cooperation, including by harnessing digital data. This brings me to the second part of your question on digital. The role I see for South-South and triangular cooperation in the area of technology sharing and the digital transition. This is very important as the digital revolution is transforming our world at lightning speed. The prospects of countries and people will depend on how they can use and benefit from digitalization. This is, in fact, an area where South-South cooperation has great potential, actually. The most well-known digital-powered leapfrogs in development have come from the global South. Take the Chinese e-commerce space, for example, or the Indian digital public services, or the Brazilian fintechs. Brazil, for example, let me give you like a couple of examples. Brazil, for example, went from having a third of their population with a bank account in 2001 to having over 85% over last year. India, for example, thanks to the program Digital India, is now adding 10 million people into the internet every single month. And China, for example, has by far the biggest e-commerce market in the planet, accounting for a third of the global market and employing tens of millions of Chinese workers and SMEs. But it is also no coincidence that most of these use cases come from big developing countries. As UNCTAD's digital economy report suggests, digital technologies have big economies of scale and naturally create digital behemoths. And that is a problem. We know that only two countries, the US and China, account for half of the world's hyperscale data centers, 94% of all funding of AI startups, 70% of the world's top AI researchers, and almost 90% of the market capitalization of the world's largest digital platforms. Another important concern is that we now face a situation where if we don't act quickly, the world will divide into two blocks. On the one hand, countries that provide and consume data, and on the other hand, countries that own and use this data. And on the other hand, and countries will be left farther behind if they cannot be part of the second group. This would create economic value with the data. Literally, data is the oil of the 21st century, and as it is powering everything around us, our schools, our phones, our hospitals, our factories, our transport systems, our financial markets. South-South cooperation has an important and historic duty here. And let me be very clear. Big developing countries should be the first to provide support to their peers in the Global South and share their positive experiences with digital and data technologies. There are encouraging signs. India, for example, is making a big push on digital and data for development as president of the G20, but much more needs to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, dear friends and colleagues, the defining verb of developing cooperation is the verb to share. Cooperation is not about giving. Cooperation, it is not about receiving. It is about sharing. It is not a donation, it is an exchange. The fact that cooperation is always both ways, because no country is ever too poor to teach or ever too rich to learn, doubles its impact. And this is the immense opportunity that should not be missed, and that this forum provides an opportunity to really discuss profoundly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Moreno. Thank you so much for capturing in very succinct way what it's all about, to share, to be giving and to receiving. And you highlight, again, like previous panelists, very many important points on South-South cooperation. Also the essence of data and having data both linked to the digital, how we are using the technology and the digital transition. But I believe that is also linked to the issue of how we can measure the evidence of the contribution of South-South cooperation and data for that. I would like to now, speaking, you have mentioned both China and India and Brazil, so that is some segue also to our next panelist. That is you, Mr. Su Wei. You are the Director General of the International Cooperation Department in the Chinese International Development Cooperation Agency in China. Very warm welcome to you, and thank you for giving time to this panel as well. You have, of course, a range of responsibilities in that capacity, but it also means that you are working in a daily way on international exchanges, both on foreign aid and human resource development cooperation. And you are, I think, quite directly involved in South-South cooperation as well. China has stepped up its partnership, and it has also done a lot of contribution to the COVID-19 pandemic impacts, and you are applying very much the Global Development and South-South Cooperation Fund to support countries also coping with the impact of COVID-19. And you have, of course, for some time also been engaged very strongly in the UN system with also cooperation and the Global Development Initiative, among others. So based on your very rich experience, how do you see the role of South-South and triangular cooperation today, and also from your perspective, what do you consider are the key aspects that really support effectiveness of South-South cooperation? Mr. Wei, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my great pleasure to attend this session on behalf of our chairman of CIDCA, China International Development Corporation. It's a newly set up agency 4 years ago. Development is the top priority for all countries. No country or individual should be left behind on the way of development. China is the largest developing country, attaches great importance to its own development and global development cooperation. Particularly over the past decade, China has eradicated absolute poverty and make huge progress in fighting against corruption. And we are moving now towards a more healthier, stronger, and greener economy. We think humanity shares a common stake in development. World stability and prosperity cannot be achieved unless developing countries can progress. China President Xi Jinping proposed Global Development Initiative, GDI, which is aligned with the 2030 UN agenda. The GDI promotes cooperation in 8 priority areas, including the pandemic response, poverty alleviation, food security, and green development. So we're trying to bring back development issues back to the center of international agenda. We live in the same planet, and we have a shared future. Global development cooperation needs a peaceful and stable environment. Security and stability are the preconditions for development. We must heed the concerns of all countries. And we also support all efforts towards a peaceful solution of all crises. Global development cooperation needs a fair and reasonable world order. We need to preserve and practice true multilateralism to support a multilateral trading system that is open, transparent, inclusive. We support the UN's coordinating role and uphold North-South cooperation as the main channel, with South-South cooperation as its complement. Global development cooperation needs the spirit of equal consultation. All countries must respect each other's sovereignty, political system, legal system, cultural difference, and its own current conditions. At the moment, China is pushing the implementation of GDI and advancing building a global development community and partnership covering economic, social, environmental aspects, with a view to helping realize the UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. China's concept of South-South cooperation upholds the following 6 principles. First, respect for the partner country's choice of development. We never interfere in other countries' internal affairs or attaches any political conditions. Second, we take an approach of people-centered. We honor our commitments and deliver concrete results to our partner countries. We put the well-being of the people first. We want them to gain and fulfill from our projects. Then, we put the priority of inclusive development. We're supporting developing countries, especially those fragile ones, with tremendous difficulties in the endeavor to address unbalanced and inadequate development among and within countries. Fourth, we have sustainable projects. China makes sure that the operation projects we are carrying out meet our recipient countries' actual needs and are economically and technically feasible. We share our development experience and industrial technologies, helping them get on the path of their self-reliance, which is very, very important. The fifth, we think the harmonious coexistence between man and nature matters. China has intensified the environmental assessment on cooperation projects and promoted the application of energy-saving and environment-friendly technologies. Six, we attach great importance to rigorous supervision and assessment. We have a special department in our CIDCA, which is looking after the assessment, supervision of all the projects. So the cooperation projects are approved following a rigorous process and strict standards and put under supervision from the very beginning to the end to ensure transparency, honesty, and cleanness from corruption. A sound standard, complete and effective standards have been formulated to access all those projects. Ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing we cannot achieve if we work in one mind towards the same goal. The Global Development Cooperation is a long and hard journey. North-South cooperation and South-South cooperation have their respective features and advantages, while we have shared some common grounds and advantages. We look forward to working with all countries to jointly advance the implementation of GDI and help achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. We have expanded multilateral and trilateral cooperation. Through trilateral cooperation with over 10 international organizations, including UNDP, WFP, UNICEF, IFRC, WHO, in such areas as public health, climate change, food security, and eco-environmental protection. We have undertaken more than 130 projects in over 50 countries, benefiting more than 20 million people. We have also talked with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and other charities about bilateral cooperation in agriculture, health, and other fields as a way to implement the GDI. Friends, you may have noticed that the China 20th CPC National Congress that just concluded not long ago, we stressed that China has always been committed to these foreign policy goals of upholding world peace and promoting common development. And we are going to dedicate more resources to global development cooperation and work with all parties to build a community of global development. So to better coordinate and lead international cooperation, so the Chinese government, just like I said earlier, we set up the China International Development Cooperation Agency 4 years ago. So China not only advocates for international development cooperation, but also takes earnest actions to push it forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wei. Thank you so much for the good news also that China will continue its involvement and maybe even expand it. Thank you for sharing the 6 principles that govern your involvement in South-South cooperation. And thank you for also highlighting the challenges, as we have consistently heard, to realize the 2030 agenda. It is uphill, and therefore it's so crucial that we all work together. You also highlighted very much the need for development for every country according to its national context and wishes, and the multilateral system can contribute to that. So thank you very much to you as well. This brings us to our contribution from Thailand. We have the pleasure of having you, Kunurirat Charyanto, the Director General of Thai International Cooperation Agency, with us. Thank you very much for that. And you have a long-standing career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Thailand, and you have served in many different positions, both ambassadorial and, of course, in Thailand. Before we move on, I do want to express a sincere appreciation to Kunurirat and Thailand for hosting very supremely the Global South-South Expo in September. It was a wonderful summit, and it was about time, as you had also said. Now, Thailand has been very active in international development cooperation and South-South Triangular cooperation for quite some time. And you have been committed not only to South-South cooperation, but you've also been exemplary in taking it forward. So from your perspective and from the perspective of the Thailand International Cooperation, please do share with us what is your approach and what have been your main experiences, and not least with regards to South-South Triangular cooperation. Kunurirat, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having TICA here at this session. It's good to be here, and it's good to see some familiar faces from GSSD Expo that we organized this year. Let me start by saying actually that South-South and Triangular Cooperation is a core of our mandate of TICA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, since Thailand has become an emerging donor in this development cooperation. As we are strongly committed to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we have established the National Committee for Sustainable Development to lead the SDGs implementation and incorporate in our 20-year national strategy from 2017 to 2036. So on the foreign policy front, Partnership for Goals, or Goal 17, has been given a top priority in order to promote Thailand's development cooperation at all levels, bilateral, trilateral, sub-regional, regional, and multilateral. We focus on human security in 4 aspects: food, health, job, energy, and environment, to promote a more balanced, inclusive, and sustainable growth. We have enthusiastically embraced the bio-circular green or BCG economy model to complement our own homegrown development approach of sufficiency economy philosophy, or SEP. At the implementation level, TICA has translated the policy into action by leveraging South-South and Triangular Cooperation as a tool to foster human security and resilient communities. We set up at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs the Committee on International Development Cooperation, chaired by our Minister of Foreign Affairs, to oversee the policy direction. This mechanism fosters interagency coordination and ensure efficiency and policy coherence. During the implementation process, we also engage in the private sector, local communities, civil society organizations, academic institutes, and relevant Thai agencies to strengthen their ownerships and promote people, public-private partnerships. In addition, we have engaged Thai youth, a new generation, in implementing our development projects under the Friends from Thailand, or FFT volunteer program. I believe that we are among the few developing countries who send volunteers for development projects outside Thailand. This program was also selected by the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs as a showcase on SDG good practices and one of the good examples of South-South cooperation. We have also worked with both the Global North and the Global South. In addition, we are currently working with the OECD to further strengthen Thailand's ODA database to support effective development cooperation and good governance. Now, I would like to draw your attention to some of the lessons that we learned based on Thailand's experience. First, the homegrown development approach is one of the key recommendations in BAPA Plus 40 outcome document. I believe that each country has its own strengths, and one of Thailand's main strengths lies in our homegrown development approach. As I have mentioned, the sufficiency economy philosophy, or SEP. It provides a development framework to achieve sustainable development, taking into account local and national context, and to advance the concept of SEP for SDGs partnerships. TICA has embraced and adapted into many of our development cooperation projects. And many of our development projects which apply the concept of SEP were recognized by the UN as one of the good practices for South-South and Triangular cooperation, such as the Trilateral Cooperation Project on the application of sufficiency economy philosophy in promoting sustainable tourism and sustainable development in Mongolia, which we partner with Germany as our global North partner. Second, I think I fully agree with my colleague from Sitka that South-South cooperation is not a substitute but complement to North-South cooperation. While Thailand is working closely with our traditional development partners from the Global North and international organizations, we are also exploring the modality of South-South cooperation with our new partners such as Egypt, Morocco, and Turkey. And through this initiative, I believe that we could combine our strengths and also create synergies to assist other developing countries. And third, the participation of private sector in the international development cooperation landscape faces some challenges. It is sometimes seen as driven by profits, not by development needs. However, I see that the participation of private sector as essential to expedite the 2030 agenda, especially in terms of funding, innovation, and technology. And fourth, at TIGA, we believe that human resource development is the key to a country's sustainable development and progress. In most of our development projects, we have included the HRD aspect and capacity building, both in providing long-term scholarships and or short-term training courses to complement the project in recipient countries. And actually, we have already shared our experiences and lessons learned in the Global South-South Development Expo 2022, or GSE Expo, as you already have mentioned. Well, let me conclude by emphasizing the importance of the 3 C's concept: coherence, complementarities, and coordination. It will ensure the successful implementation of development cooperation initiatives. Good coordination at all levels will ensure that South-South and triangular cooperation works better and brings about complementarities among various platforms. And last but not least, South-South and triangular cooperation needs to be coherent throughout the whole process, from policy formulation to proper implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kunurirat. Again, another very rich and important contribution to this debate, highlighting, well, not only what also I think you, Dr. Slamet, highlighted from the beginning, the involvement of the private sector, but also academia and civil society, ensuring again we have these inclusive, sustainable development and dialogue, but also highlighting the CCC, the coherence and complementarity and coordination. I think a very succinct concept as well. And I would then want to invite our 8th contribution. And here we have with us Ms. Marita Gonzalez. You are the co-chair of the Civil Society Partnership for Development Effectiveness. And you have a very strong background in, of course, in development and political science and sociology, but you are also working with the General Confederation of Labor of the Argentine Republic, and you are also coordinating, I believe, the platform of monitoring for the 2030 agenda. And may I, in a bracket, take the opportunity to congratulate your country for a victim last night. So,
thank you.
Yes.
But
Marita, you have a long-standing engagement with social dialogue issues and the promotion of social justice. And it's through that work you have also worked substantially with the union movement in the Americas. So from your perspective, what is the role of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to promote knowledge transfer, including also engaging the workers and employers organizations better? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Well, thank you very much. But thank you especially because I think basically, yes, this is an excellent example. Copal, where France, Morocco, Argentina, this is a triangular cooperation, South-South also possibly, but it is an example. So thank you very much on behalf of all of Latin America and the Caribbean, not only my country, Argentina. First and foremost, what are the challenges, the basic challenges about South-South and triangular cooperation? from the perspective of us as civil service organizations, and how do we see how the multi-actor dialogues can be made more powerful. This is the value added that South-South cooperation can provide. Practically, the voices of social side of the unions in the certain spaces have provided two very important things recently. The first one is about the equitable transition. And when we talk about that, we're talking about common or shared responsibilities, but basically the countries of the South also have the right to development. So shared but common but differentiated responsibilities is one of the elements that the Global South has carried to as a message to the international spaces. Then the next one is climate financing, and what we're putting forward here is the need, and this debate that took place in the earlier panel, but talking about how do we monetize, how do we do real financing so that the South can actually be convert itself productively whilst working on decent work and on the creation of jobs to be able to achieve a more harmonious and sustainable development. And this is what we call the triple nexus. I think that the South-South cooperation must work on the humanitarian crisis. We're extremely concerned not by this war only, but by all of the conflicts and wars. I come from a zone where there's peace, and one of our characteristics is that we want to plead in favor of peace. And we have to plead in favor of the promotion of human rights. And that is one of the crucial elements that we have to develop in South-South and triangular cooperation. Number two, the right to development of peoples in the Global South. I think that this means that we must be involved in delivering, in designing, and in monitoring everything which is South-South and triangular cooperation so that things fall in line with Agenda 2030 and the democratic social organizations that are actually in the field. And I have many, many examples, the examples that have been provided to us here in terms of elements of countries themselves. I wanted to provide an example here that is that our territories are not only on the country level, it's also a regional. I think that the South-South and triangular cooperation is very important for the African Union, for example, for the CICICA of Central America, for the Caribbean, for example, and the program that the United Nations, the UNDP, and the countries of the European Union in the Chaco area for the promotion of equality and health for women, but also indigenous peoples, to be able to make sure that people have drinking water. And how about the taking ownership by organizations to promote decent work, social dialogue, as the trade unions have always fostered. We have to focus on and work on how these integration processes, such as the CELAC, that's the Economic Community of Latin America and the Caribbean, how it can help us to develop. When we look at the transfer of capacities or technology, the example of the forensic anthropology team from Argentina that is working on those who have been victims of violations, crimes against humanity. This has developed enormously, but also in the South, in order to reduce what is the cancer of the uterus from the girl child up to adult women. That's a very important thing that's been done. When we see that there's no long-term financing, we can see how that possibility actually shrinks or we take steps backward. So we have to be able to move forward on this and work jointly. Civil society organizations and the multilateral system as well. We have some pretty clear examples. Let me just give you an example of the program for property that has been returned. That's a triangular area in Argentina where we've worked with Italy. We have worked with the neighboring countries, and also civil society organizations, all working together to promote a law that leads to a social reuse of use for society of goods that are confiscated from criminals. And this bill has reached the parliament in Argentina, and this is thanks to the efforts of civil society, of the trade unions, of indigenous peoples, of the human rights organizations as well, all working in a triangular cooperation fashion. I think it's a concrete example of how we can come up with better results. They are results that can be more quantified if we do all of this by pooling our efforts, if we do it together. So let's work together, and let's work in a coordinated fashion to be in line with Agenda 2030, and let's leave no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gonzalez, for making the insights available on, again, the importance of shared responsibility and the importance of having funding for South-South cooperation as well. And of course, what you underscore also with your examples, as other panelists have done, the necessary people-centered focus. Thank you very much for that contribution. And now our last contributor will be you, Mr. José Antonio González Norris. You are the Executive Director of the Peruvian Agency for International Cooperation. Thank you also to you for being available for this panel. You have, of course, with Peru, a very strong and long experience both of integrating effectiveness principles in your various types of cooperation, also in the South-South and triangular, but I would say also the multi-stakeholder partnerships that you've been involved in. And then in, I think, the Andean countries, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Colombia, Peru especially has been a strong leader in various social approaches, also for indigenous peoples and gender mainstreaming. So I think for very many of us it's important to hear from you, Mr. Norris. What are the key achievements from Peru that you would like maybe to highlight that are promoting effective South-South triangular cooperation, be it in the post-pandemic situation or in general? And also, we would like to hear from you what you think is important, how to measure and assess the results of South-South and triangular cooperation, and to improve the development cooperation. You are welcome to use the podium. The floor is yours, Mr. Norris.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning. I believe everyone has their equipment to listen, because the person Manita, who spoke before me, was speaking Spanish. So just like to greet everyone and to say that Peru, as a medium-income country, has been increasing its South-South cooperation activities in a sustained and significant way over the course of the last few years. And the participation of our country offering technical cooperation has increased, going from 8 projects at the beginning of the last decade to more than 50 projects in 2020. And in this way, the country seeks to position itself as a country that manages technical cooperation and shares know-how and good practices, mainly with its partners in Latin America and the Caribbean, with a clear aspiration to reach to other parts of the world in accordance with our foreign policy and our process of accession to OECD. Recently, the International Agency for Cooperation has put out its new catalog of projects, where we have identified 34 successful experiments carried out by Peruvian institutes that respond to 7 areas where we can contribute to reverse the effects of the pandemic. And to guide these efforts, I think it's important to mention that we're in the process of approving a new international program that attaches an importance to improvement of technology transfer, both as a recipient country and as a transferring country. So taking into account the complex scene in the world as a result of the crisis, it's clear that if there are catalogs that can help with South-South cooperation, then it's a very good thing. And I'd like to say that we are prepared, we're ready to take on a positive role, which raises the hierarchy and the quality, the impact of South-South and triangular arrangements in accordance with our partners and in accordance with our status as a country and our commitment to the global partnership agenda. Turning now to the topic of how important it is to measure the results of South-South and triangular cooperation and how this contributes to the effectiveness of the contribution to development, we'd like to affirm that South-South and triangular cooperation is ever more relevant to mobilize resources for the 2030 agenda and to come up with innovative and sustainable solutions to the challenges. But it is, however, necessary to both measure and assess these processes in the South-South and triangular cooperation. The final document of the second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation, which was held in Buenos Aires, stressed or highlighted the importance of understanding the value of South-South and triangular cooperation, applying a methodology for measuring on the basis of existing experiments and taking into account the diversity of this type of cooperation and the national context and focus. One of the major challenges in this area of South-South and triangular cooperation is the process of strengthening the institutional framework and coming up with results and producing qualitative information and quantitative information. I'm talking about data, which is something which is mentioned in the Pavamas 40 document. Many countries in the area, including Peru, are developing methodologies that make it possible to evaluate and to put forward triangular and South-South cooperation as a central core part of something that is attempting to expand their knowledge and contribution to sustainable development. And in this sense, we must acknowledge the very significant work that the General Secretariat of the Americas and the program, South-South program. This is a very important contribution so that the region can maintain its commitment, which is to strengthen South-South and triangular cooperation through the development of both capacities, but also conceptual frameworks and methodologies, but also systems, information, data. And we must also mention the work which is done by the Global Partnership work, where there's the strengthening of cooperation as a way of implementing the 2030 agenda. We are aware, however, that we still must move towards methodologies that produce qualitative information in light of the initiatives of the South-South and triangular cooperation, but also the effectiveness of its management, but also the impacts of this cooperation. From the point of view of our country, we also are in favor of strengthening South-South and triangular cooperation, strengthening its effectiveness and reach or scope through management which is aimed towards results and results-based outcomes and innovative solutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Norris, for yet another very comprehensive and rich intervention with a clear focus again on also the cruciality of South-South cooperation to contribute to the delivering of the SDGs, making sure also that we can measure quantitatively and qualitatively the results and impact of these interventions. Now, with that, colleagues, I would like to suggest that we are now opening for the floor. And I'm aware, and again, my apologies for having checked my phone, but it's just to see that we have some already asking for the floor. And therefore, I would like to turn to Ms. Barrera, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs from Guatemala, to please take the floor first. Please.
Muy buenos días a
Good morning, everyone. Greetings to the moderator and to the panelists today. I'd like to commend you for this very important dialogue and for sharing such interesting experience that we've heard. Without a doubt, South-South cooperation complements, does not replace traditional North-South cooperation. However, to establish the appropriate platforms for the exchange of information makes it possible to take advantage of the main role of South-South and triangular cooperation, so that countries, that medium-level countries, can provide this type of information and receive this type of cooperation. For them, South-South cooperation has actually turned into and is increasingly very essential at all levels and in all fields of the international and national efforts. And it is becoming very relevant in the current situation that the world is experiencing. And one should stress, I think, that one of the that the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine have had a very significant factor, negative effects, deleterious effects on the world in general. Now, with the configuration of the international system and the South-South and triangular cooperation has been reformed as a mechanism today to achieve goals that are common for all countries and that are in line with the agenda, with 2030, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Now, this is an attractive window of opportunity where through innovation, cultural, economic, and social innovations make it possible for developing countries would make their preferences and their governmental interests internationally known. As we said on the first day of the conference, in the first dialogue, the countries of Latin America are asking for South-South and triangular cooperation to have as a priority partnerships that occur through national public policies and the plans of action of the countries and cooperating entities under the principles of harmonization, being in line with appropriation, ownership, and mutual responsibility. One of the main reasons why we have South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation is that we can build a system which would tend to satisfy, as a matter of priority, the national interests. And this indicates that beyond the guiding principles of South-South and triangular cooperation, managing it requires specific political effects, and so that it can be institutionalized and it can contribute to what the state wishes to achieve, and in parallel with the regional areas as well. Since 2014, Guatemala has had a national development plan, that's Guatemala 2025, which contains a specific number of guidelines, and this is an example of how we can have ours in line with the international goals. The idea was that when we signed the Sustainable 2030 goals, we decided to make sure that the 2030 plan was in line with our agenda so that we could have a unified agenda that would make it possible to fulfill the goals of both instruments, ours and the 2030 one, and to make sure that the 2030 agenda would fit with the priorities of our country. In this way, Guatemala would like to create some links, cooperation links, and extend a hand to its partners. And for this, since last year, we've created a catalog of what can be offered from an international point of view, and it has 35 good practices for training institutes, and we're prepared to share these with the rest of the world. So we have a dual role, and we would like to contribute, even though it's a small part, in our modest way to this conference. And so under the presidency of the the Council of Ministers, since 2022, we have promoted the elaboration of a catalog that contains offer of cooperations as a Caribbean block or package presented to the world, making it possible, therefore, for members of this organization to offer these projects to the international community. In conclusion, it's important to mention, I think, that a greater participation of the medium-level countries in the international cooperation initiatives can have a multiplying effect to be sure, which can benefit not only developing countries, but the international community as a whole. I will stop there. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Minister, for this contribution. And I believe we also have from Spain, Ms. Eva de Hoyo, please. And you are the Director General of the Sustainable Development Policy in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Spain. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks for the floor. I'm gonna speak in Spanish if you don't mind. Buenos días a todos.
Good morning to one and all, and thank you for the invitation and for organizing this excellent three-day conference and for the sessions. I will go directly now to the core of the role played by Spain. Let's not forget that Spain was a dual country. It was receiving ODA, although not too much, but it has always been in favor of work with countries in transition because it's extremely important with that, with the 2030 agenda. We are all in transition countries, and our idea of sustainable and global solidarity is that we acknowledge that Spain and Spanish cooperation is working with the countries in transitions, and it's not just the income that is involved, but they're taking into account quite apart from GDP. Spain is working with the 2030 agenda, but our main point is development, and we're working with ODS 67, and we have a triangular and horizontal and is focused on a dialogue which is based on demand and with an active formulation. There's monitoring, evaluation as well of the fundamental principles of the effectiveness agenda, and that's the core of what we do. We use instruments to do this, such as institutional strengthening, capacity building in regional cooperation as well. And for this, we have some specific instruments that we have designed to work with countries, which are called Advanced Cooperation Agreement, where we create horizontal partnerships, common work, where the Triangular and South-South cooperation are one of the instruments that we work most on, and we improve with these the quality of the assistance and the impact that they have on the partnership countries in a real horizontal partnership. It involves something where there's shared global cooperation, equal. Everyone brings forward resources depending on their technical abilities. And for this, medium and high income countries are all involved because they can be donors and they can be a part of the final of the Alliance for Sustainable Development. Triangular cooperation is a transition measure for medium countries, which on the short term are going to stop being pure recipients of ODA. And there are partnerships that are created which make it possible to have achievements in various areas: security, human rights, economic stability, climate change. There's the Ibero-American Program for the Strengthening of South-South Cooperation. That's an initiative that came out of the Chile Summit in 2007. And to give you some information, and I'll stop there, throughout 2019, Spain had 46 actions and cooperation programs that were under South-South. About half of these, 46%, were carried out under a modality of triangular cooperation where Spain was supporting the transfer of capacity. The rest of it, 54%, covered initiatives that were purely South-South cooperation. The triangular ones this year made it possible for Spain to support the strengthening of its Latin American partners in many different areas, mainly areas such as the environment, legal, judicial, human areas, public policies, the management of finances, among others. And Spain has had an exchange of experience in the area of culture, strengthening of public policies, and education. Although the cooperation from Spain involved many partners, many of them in Latin America, there were exchanges with Uruguay, Brazil, Costa Rica, and Chile. And of the 46 initiatives maintained, the main ones were ODC 11, Sustainable Communities, and Peace, Justice, and Solid Institutions, those two. And as I said, the main work is being done with Latin America in the Latin American area, but the Spanish Corporation would like to open up some of these programs to other areas, such as partner areas, such as Africa and some areas in Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Spain for this contribution as well. I am now in the unfortunate situation that I will need to close for contribution, and that's in spite of the fact that we have in our virtual forum quite a lot of questions and observations. But I do want you to know that we have a very active virtual forum, and those of you that have posted there, we will get back to you directly with input to your questions and the observations. But thank you very much for being active also in the virtual forum. Now, I want to absolutely not summarize all these rich contributions, because that's not possible. But let me just highlight a few things that are very recurrent in the various contributions. And that is indeed that we have, as a planet, as a world, very many challenges ahead of us to deliver on the SDG agenda that we all are keen to do. It also means that we need to do things differently, and we need to do even more, as many of you have highlighted. We are also clear that the resources that are available will not as such ever be sufficient. Therefore, we do need to find new ways of working together. The South-South Triangular Cooperation is indeed a continuously very appreciated, important, complementary modality to that of development cooperation, and it needs indeed to harness and still protect that it always responds to the issues of national priorities, that it's nationally owned, and that it is homegrown solutions that are identified and shared. Now, the point that was also made on it is important to share, share, share. It has to cut across everything we do in South-South cooperation. And I would like to end by saying that all the panelists also very much endorsed not only the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation as a forum, but also our forum we have in the GPI. And I would like to use that by saying, please do give a very big round of applause for our panelists for their precious contributions. And then I would like to thank all of you here in the room and virtually for having participated. My final point will be to also share with you that there is a group of countries that has worked on a joint statement, and that I believe includes Indonesia. It's also with Peru and Portugal. Our gentleman from Portugal had to leave, but Portugal is there as well. I believe UNCTAD, you are a part of it as well, in support of South-South cooperation. And that joint statement will be available for all of you to read on the website. So that is coming up as well. And with that, it is for me to say thank you very much again, and we look forward to continue this debate in the GPDC and other fora. So thank you very much for participating. Thank you very much.